guys, Patrick here, and today I'm going to tell my personal D&D horror story. And the reason why I say story and not stories is because I really only have the one that was, super bad. I've had other, sort of little things happen in the games I've played over the 6 years that I've been playing D&D, but, for the most part, those all got snuffed out pretty quickly, because I made a point to, basically talk to my players and be like, hey, what's wrong, and let's adjust things, and blah, 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 blah. So basically, everything after the first major D&D horror story I ever had, I basically learned from that experience and kept it from ever happening again. So this is basically the one and only major D&D horror story I ever had. And unfortunately, it was during my first campaign ever. So a little background. 6 years ago, me and my girlfriend at the time were extremely interested in D&D. We wanted to play super, super bad. And it turned out that one of our friends at the time was, has been doing D&D since he was 8 or 10 years old or something like that. So he has 10 years of experience. And we were like, oh shit, we get to finally play D&D. So we did a one shot with him. It all went fine. And we were like, oh man, we want more. And he was like, well, we can do a campaign. And we were like, yeah. So we got 2 more people in, and we decided to, do a whole campaign together. And this campaign, everything went fine at first, but there were just some little things that happened throughout the entire campaign that sort of bugged everybody, that everybody sort of noticed, but they were like, it's not super big deals until they were. Problem number 1, he did not deviate from the module in any way, shape, or form, no matter how creative or outside of the box we tried to get with characters or story beats. Everything would happen exactly as it was written, with no turns or deviations, no matter what was thrown at him. Problem number 2, we leveled up by milestones instead of experience points, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but it was quite clear that we didn't scale at the rate we should have when it came to enemies further down the line. We started off sort of fine, but then fights only kept getting harder and harder and harder and harder, communicating to us that we probably should have been a higher level just by the rate at which each fight was harder than the last. And finally, that was the next big thing, was just everything was so difficult. Every skill check seemed impossibly high. Every battle was like a fucking nail biter to see whether we would win or lose. You know what I mean? It's like we were constantly, we didn't really feel like heroes. We more felt like, I don't know how you want to put it, but I guess if just normal farmers became adventurers one day, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but I do really feel like our failures far outweighed our successes in every regard. To give a for instance, there was one major incident where we had an airship crash, and me and my girlfriend's characters failed our saving throws, and the other 2 players barely passed theirs, and our characters died, which I'm fine with, but their characters only lived with 1 or 2 HP points, between, left. And it's oh wow. So, I don't necessarily have a problem with, if you fail the check, that's basically certain death. I know some people would, but it's like an airplane crash. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but that almost was a TPK and they succeeded. So that, was sort of a problem in and of itself, I feel. But none of those things were major problems, like I said, until they were. And here's how they became major problems. Like I said, my character died in an airship crash. This character, he didn't particularly rock the boat or whatever. He was your typical all bronze, no brain muscle of the group, right? So he didn't really do anything that spectacular or standoutish, right? This all changed with my second character because I kind of wanted to make him the opposite of the first. Because my girlfriend wanted to be the new muscle, and I was like, okay. So that's what her character became. My character, I decided to make him a sniveling, coward piece of shit pussy. And, you know, what the DM didn't necessarily get what I was kind of going for, I would say, because the DM saw my character, and we went by roles and everything, so everything was sort of random chance with this character. However, I wound up rolling extremely high in every single stat for this character. He had like his lowest stat was a +1. He had multiple +3s and +4s, and he also had the most health of anyone in the group. But the thing is that I already decided that he was going to be weak and cowardly and like basically fight from the back line. He carried around a sling, and he also had insanely high AC because he was coated in full plate armor with a shield. And the reason for that was because, again, he was a coward. He didn't want to get hurt. It was basically like his paranoia. And so even though he had the highest HP and AC, he constantly fought from the back row, shooting a sling. And all the other players thought that this was hilarious, primarily because I didn't make him do anything that was like detrimental to the party. I didn't make him steal like party loot or whatever, and not to mention I made him to be the butt of the jokes that was going on. You know what I mean? Like, he would constantly get kicked around, be belittled, and then he would like have a crybaby hissy fit, like, I can't believe you would say that to me. Like, you know, he wasn't meant to be a character that was meant to be taken seriously by the rest of the party. Everybody, you know what I mean, it was meant to dunk on him. And the thing is, everybody in the party thought that this was a hilarious character, except for the DM. The DM hated this character. He hated him so fucking much. Part of the reason for that is because he thought I was playing the character wrong, because this DM was openly a power gamer. You know what I mean? He didn't really care much for backstories, or things of that nature. He more or less just kind of cared about how powerful you could make a character, and trying to make the most powerful characters possible. And basically to him, I was playing this one wrong, because even though I was, you know, big and strong and all that shit, you know, I was cowering in the back line as though I were weak and frail. I remember the first big incident that he got mad at was we were fighting an undead minotaur, and I fought in the back row the whole time, and I was a cleric, by the way, so I was healing people and shit like that. I wasn't just doing nothing in combat. I still was fulfilling, you know what I mean, a role. I was basically like the designated healer, and I was shooting slings in the back. I missed every single fucking shot. And then finally, I hit the undead minotaur once, did 2 damage, and that was the shot that killed it. And immediately my character went on a you know what I mean, a tirade, basically being like, I felled the undead minotaur, and the rest of the party actually went along with it. They were like, you know, they didn't try to take the wind out of my sails. They were like, that truly was amazing. Wow, I guess you aren't all talk after all. You know what I mean? It was kind of the running joke for a minute. And he got mad at that because he didn't like the way that, you know what I mean, this character basically swooped in and took all the credit for the rest of the party's hard work, even though the rest of the party got the joke. Finally, this went on a little bit further, and then finally, the big blow-up happened where the party monk got killed. And we were swimming underwater, he got eaten by a shark, and he was carrying all of my character's stuff. And so my character is up, when we get out of the situation, he's up on the dock, and he's, like, crying his eyes out. And the party rogue comes over, and she's like, there, I feel your pain. And my character immediately turns to her and says, why do you care about all my stuff? So long story short, we were piloting a submarine. It got capsized, blah, 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 blah. The submarine captain, I saw him and I blamed him for what happened. I was like, you're the reason my stuff's gone. And I cursed him out, and I went on a tangent where I said, like, I hope you die in the most painful way you possibly could. And the rogue was like, our friend is just distraught. He doesn't mean that. And I was like, no, I do. I really, really mean it. I hope you... And before I can say anything further, the DM slams the book shut in front of him. And he just looks at me and he says, congratulations, you're not a cleric anymore. And I immediately bust out laughing. I'm like, oh my god, that's so fucking funny. And so I describe as the light beams shoot out of my character's eyes as he rolls on the ground and writhing in pain. And then he stands back up and looks back at the submarine operator and says, and now I've lost my powers, and it's all your fault. And the rest of the table bursts out laughing. The DM, in a huff, gets up behind the screen. He says the game's over for tonight, and he goes over to his computer, and he's just, pissed. He's, seething. And I go over to him, and I'm like, yo, I straight up ask him, I'm like, am I that hard of a player to play with? And he says, this character is. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do about it? And he's like, well, honestly, I don't really want to play ever again with this character. And I was like, I feel like you're the only one who feels that way. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just kind of felt sort of taken aback by the fact that his reason for getting mad is that why he got mad was basically because I threw away my cleric powers and then made a joke out of it. Because it's a fucking game. And honestly, I thought this was a good way for my character to go. Because again, he was meant to be shit on. But the DM didn't see it that way. And, basically I was like, all right, I guess I'll tone it down a little bit. And he was like, all right, that's fine. And, and the other players, before he went off in a huff, I'm remembering now, they all thought that this was hilarious too, because I wrote not cleric under my class on my character sheet, and we were like, yo, can I just keep the party monk who died, who then became the party bard in the next session, but he's the one who came up with the idea of can he keep taking levels in cleric but not get spells, basically, which would essentially turn me into a shitty fighter. And I was like, yes, that's great. The DM was like, no, he's not allowed to do that. Which I don't know. I couldn't see any other way that my character would level up then, because it's not like I could just become a fighter and learn how to use swords and shit. But in any case, after that happened, suddenly there was a very direct shift. I noticed this immediately. Suddenly, every enemy had an instant kill attack. And also suddenly, every enemy in the game suddenly only attacked me. Going forward. It was not so subtle. I noticed it right away. Even though I did tone it down, I didn't really do anything. I didn't really act I didn't really have any outspoken moments or anything going forward. I just kind of unless characters address me and then I was a little bit pompous or whatever, but I didn't go on these huge tangents like I used to. But that didn't stop the sudden insta-kill attacks coming from every fucking direction, which the only reason I was able to avoid was because of my absurdly high AC. And so finally, it all came to a head when we were in the final dungeon of the campaign. Oh, right. I forgot the other big problem. My bad. Let me reverse for a second of how we got to the final big dungeon. Basically the main character who's been giving us quests this whole time is like main villain is in the final dungeon, and he's got the pieces to basically cause the end of the world. And the party monk who became the bard said, no, he doesn't. And the DM was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, remember back like so-and-so however long ago, when we were supposed to turn over certain quest items, which eventually fell into the hands of the big bad evil guy, I decided to keep one of those things for myself, so he doesn't have this thing. And the DM immediately was like, oh, well, then I guess he doesn't have it and the game's over. And immediately, you know, we were all like, whoa, like, is it that important? He's like, yeah. And instead of him, like, adapting the script or whatever to, again, you know, sort of go along with the decisions we made, we decided to retcon that clever decision to make it so that it never happened, so that the plot could move forward. Awesome. So then we're in the final dungeon, and we're walking around, blah, 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 nothing really of note, until finally we get into a room coated in mud, and a giant mud monster is barreling towards us. We all say we want to go leave the room. The DM just says you can't. He doesn't give us a reason why we can't leave the room. He just says you can't leave. And so we assume that that means that the door is barred in some way. So we're like, okay, I guess we'll fight this thing. It almost one-shots two of the party members. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll take a shot at it, because again, I'm the strongest one. So I go, and it fucking one-shots me. It downs me immediately. I don't die, but I do get downed, and I'm like way far away from everyone else. And I tell the rest of the party members, out of character, obviously, to basically just try and run away while I distracted her or whatever. In character, if my character was conscious, he'd probably be like, don't leave me! So the rest of the party gets more distance between them, and then the mud monster, instead of going after them, decides to cave my fucking unconscious character's skull in. And then the rest of the party basically is like, well, I guess we're just dead. And the DM's like, why? And they explain, like, well, the door's locked, and it just killed the strongest guy here effortlessly, so I don't think we stand much of a chance. And he's like, oh, the door's not locked. And everyone's like, what? And he's like, yeah, you're free to leave anytime you want. And we're like, well, that's not what you said earlier. And he's like, I don't think... He started gaslighting us, and he was like, I don't think so. I don't think that's what I said. And everyone's like, no, you said that. And he was like, oh, well, the door's not locked, so you can leave. And I was just like... So... Then we, you know, I went to play video games. One of the other members of the table was actually so annoyed by that encounter that he was just like, yeah, my character says, fuck this. And he turns around and he leaves, and he doesn't feel like exploring the dungeon anymore. So he basically just rage quit. He was like, yeah, I don't feel like being here no more. And then the only person left in the game at that point was my girlfriend at the time, and she was like, well, I want to see at least how far I can get. She got one more room, she fell down a pit and died, and that was the end of the campaign. Yay! 6 months for that, baby. So yeah, no, nobody was really satisfied with that ending. I remember me and my girlfriend, we got in the car to drive away for that night, and we both were just like, that was the biggest load of fucking bullshit. Like, we were both like, we were just killed by fucking bullshit just because he didn't feel like playing the game anymore. And you know, the rest of the party already was none too pleased. So we all never played D&D together ever again after that, just because none of us just liked the way that went. Now, that didn't destroy our friendships or whatever. You know, we still had friendships outside of D&D. Nothing outside of that ever changed. So we didn't have, like, this big blowout argument where we were like, fuck you, you killed my character. I hate you forever now. You know what I mean? We all just seethed. We're just like, well, Our styles of D&D do not mesh, so we shall not play together again. And that was basically the story. And going forward, like I said, I took that and I used it as a lesson, basically to talk to my players whenever they have a problem with me, whenever I have a problem with them, and not to mention now I basically hold like feedback sessions, like every 10 or so sessions, I'll be like, all right, I want to hear your feedback. And I've taken feedback and I've used adjustments from it to try and make my games better and have my players enjoy them more. But that has been this story from me, you guys. Please let me know what you think about it down in the comments. I'm Patrick, and I'll see you next time.